Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown made of thorns, put it on his head, and dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him and saying, "Greetings, King of the Judeans," and they kept striking him in the face. Pilate went outside again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know I find no basis for a charge against him." So Jesus came outside, wearing the thorn crown and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Look, the man." When the chief priests and the temple officers saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, because I find no basis for a charge against him." The Judean authorities answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he made himself God's son." When Pilate heard this statement, he became even more afraid. He went back into the governor's headquarters and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Don't you know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Because of this, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate kept trying to release him, but the Judean authorities shouted, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover. It was about noon. Pilate said to the Judean authorities, "Look, your king." They shouted, take him away, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Should I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king except Caesar." Then Pilate handed Jesus over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus. Carrying the cross for himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, with Jesus in the middle. Pilate also wrote a notice and put it on the cross. It read, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Judeans." Many of the Judeans read this notice because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. It was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests of the Judeans said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Judeans, but this man said, 'I am King of the Judeans.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his outer clothing and divided it into 4 shares, 1 share for each soldier. They also took his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it will be." This was so the scripture would be fulfilled. "They divided my clothing among themselves, and for my garment they cast lots." So the soldiers did these things. Standing near Jesus' cross were his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Ma'am, look your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Look your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. After this, knowing that everything had now been completed, Jesus said, so that the scripture would be completed, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the sour wine on a hyssop branch and brought it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is completed." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Since it was preparation day, the Judean authorities did not want the bodies to remain on the crosses during the Sabbath, because that Sabbath was a great day. So they asked Pilate to have the men's legs broken and the bodies taken away. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and then of the other man who had been crucified with Jesus. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he had already died, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. The one who saw this has testified, and his testimony is true. He knows that he is telling the truth, so that you also may trust. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. And again, another scripture says, they will look at the one they pierced. After these things, Joseph from Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Judean authorities, asked Pilate if he could take away Jesus' body. Pilate gave permission, so he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also came, the one who had first come to Jesus at night. He brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. So they took Jesus' body and wrapped it in linen cloths with the spices, according to the burial custom of the Judeans. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever yet been laid. So because it was the Judean preparation day, and because the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.